The Merry Pranksters. Chapter 13, Episode 2. The one question I want to ask Dickie is, if everything has already been set in motion, leaving us with a mere illusion of choice, who then broke the rack in the first place? I didn't ask him, though. Instead, I blew out a hit of pure opium, praying it would kick in soon, and recalled Dickie's hole-in-one. After hearing the chains on the 18th hole, we ran over the hill to check it out, and there, leaning against the bucket, slow clapping with Dickie's anarchy black disc laying at his feet, Foukie stood with a mischievous twinkle in his eye that said, "Sorry, boys, so close." It was Hank, not Dickie, who sized up the big fella and, in a voice the entire forest could hear, said, "You wouldn't dare." Fook was wearing a baby blue Adidas tracksuit and matching Kangol. By the way he grasped at his chest, I would not have bet against him actually wearing a string of pearls under that fleece jacket. When he said, "What? It bounced right out. It happens," it just reinforced my theory about white dudes who wear Kangols. There's just so much we'll never see eye to eye on. When I finished speaking, Dickie pinched the bridge of his nose, then looked up like he'd made his mind up. Twisting the silver cap back on the porcelain bottle of Colosse Azul Respondo, he walked it back to the bar. As he rummaged around the cabinets, the look on his face bore a hint of reserved sincerity, and when he returned, he held a tray with 2 clay Ochoko cups and steaming Tokuri pitcher filled with warm Zankyo Super 7 sake. I wasn't thirsty, but if we were going to get into what Foukie had to say, we'd need to take the edge off. Bowing deeply before our fragile oriental cups, Dickie's voice remained a hollow cornerstone. Though still deeply skeptical, we agreed when it came to the Irish drug lord's relationship with Blackout Records. There was a stark contrast between Foukie and Hank's definition of totally separate. We also agreed that it was disturbing the way Fook's tone took an aggressive turn and his face hardened when he prefaced his speech with, "Look, I didn't want to have to tell you guys this." He confessed that what he was actually trying to tell us the night of Gonzo's funeral was that his aim was to protect us all along. Nothing nefarious. Struggling to articulate a relevant point, he reiterated what we already knew about the Hollywood buskers wanting to sign with Blackout Records, assuring us again and again that Blackout had nothing to do with the Irish Mafia. He had already told us the label wanted to have one of their bands play the Halloween Monster Mash, but it turns out that wasn't the whole story. We both recall him lowering his voice to a sober, cautionary tone when he was nearing his point. The truth is, it's not that Blackout Records are connected to the Irish mob. They're obviously not. But, he pauses, the Hollywood buskers are. They've been in deep with the Irishmen the whole time, and it's him demanding they play the gig. His tone now carried with it on its shoulders an animated conviction that sounded like a threat. The worst part is, he's the one slandering us all over Horace. He's even been trying to big league Megs to make it happen by feeding hit pieces about us to that bitch reporter April. These gangsters have effective ways to get what they want. Old school ways. Now, if we sign with Blackout, they won't need the buskers or the Irishmen, and all those goons will be out of our lives forever. But if we don't sign, he inhales a sharp breath before saying, "The Irish mob will make damn sure we never play another gig as long as we live." Dickie starts by salting 2 glasses. Then he sets down a napkin and leans into the bar, holding a tiny cast-iron vial up to his face for a close inspection. Splashing Tabasco sauce into the potion, then pouring in some vodka, and then a little more, Dickie pauses. With an acknowledging nod that ends with 2 eyebrows raised to his forehead, he states, "All right, but that's not what this is all about." The condescension behind the look of surprise was involuntary. I held the look until I realized that Dickie could see right through me. As he prepares his elaborate concoction, I catch myself staring, hypnotized by the grinding of a chili pepper down to a fine dark powder. I tell myself not to give away too much, but under that spell, I end up singing like a stool pigeon. I don't come right out and tell him I get the feeling Hank's reservations about Fuki's blackout deal are not in good faith. I also don't tell him I suspect him of being a co-conspirator. Though I'm pasty, spewing with tension, I do manage to muster up the balls to admit that things are just not adding up. I don't raise my voice when I explain how frustrating it is, all of our competing versions for what pulling this off looks like, leaving me unsure of who I can trust. Who decided things were beyond debate? Who even gets to decide that? I say diplomatically with my eyes squinted tightly shut. And I'm also not totally convinced. I try to say this without sounding accusatory or mentioning the word treason. We're even being completely honest about what we're not debating either. When he tosses the dash of strange magic, a plume of smoke ignites a dull blue flame. I'm snapped viciously from my trance. I don't know, Dickie. All this cloak and dagger shit got me feeling like a criminal. It's like, I don't know what this reminds me of. I sigh. Like a bacon cheeseburger and a Bloody Mary, or the IRS or something. Way too much of what I didn't ask for and never wanted. Dickie ceremoniously drops the olives in one of the glasses and tells me it's an old family recipe for a Mexican mindfunk. Encouraging me to drink up, a burning chill runs through me as the strange brew kills what's inside of me. He tells me, the high tides come and we all rejoice. When the low tide ebbs, we stick together. Then, like he's admitting to something heinous, as casually as the pendulum swings, the storms that we're weathering since that video went viral will also pass. As the effects of the mindfunk begin to take hold, I take a slow, intentional breath. Blood starts to pump at a sustainable speed, and I can finally unclench my jaw. Leaning into the bar, Dickie pops a pearl onion in the air and, after he catches it, asks, do you know what they call a martini made with an onion instead of an olive? Is this a joke? A Gibson, he says, tossing a gin-soaked onion up in the air for me to catch. And you know, the devil never comes dressed as a snake in the grass. It comes dressed as everything you've ever dreamed of. Pointing the blade of his plastic sword at my throat, he says, you add all that shit together, Holmes, and mix in a few too many of those happy pills, and you've got yourself a recipe for a glorious little flood, man. Dickie's voice takes on a soothing tone as the Spanish concoction works its black magic. So look, man, all that other shit aside, Val stopping by without calling first is not nothing, but that's just a snowflake in the bigger avalanche. I could have changed the subject. I could have just agreed with him and sank the 9-ball in the corner pocket. But of course I didn't. From somewhere unknown, the room began to throb and words started to spill out. I told him that thoughts of Valerie have been consuming me. I admit that after losing the caddy and all the crap I'm learning at school, that when I see her, I only wonder how long she'll stay. And when she leaves, all I can think about is when I'll see her again. After listening carefully, Dickie planted his pool stick firmly on the ground, tilted his head to the side, and asked, really? Maybe I wanted him to ask me that. I raise my eyes, weeping with pity, and hold his glance. Not unless we're talking about I admit. The jagged little white tablets, the time-released blue capsules, and those hard-to-swallow red pills. Crunching on a booze-flavored ice cube, he puts on an introspective face and begins speaking about a game that I didn't know I was playing and don't know the rules to. All right, Alfie, it's time to get your head straight, he says, wiping some green foam from his thin, dark mustache. See, here's the deal. All these things aren't as unrelated as they may seem. There's a rhythm to all this, sort of a river where everything flows towards a center. It's like a dance, you know. Occasionally you're leading, but most of the time you're just being tossed around like an old rag doll. Ever since that video blew up, it feels like we're all just barely hanging on. His eyes are intense and spiraling right through me. Val didn't ask to be swept up in all this, you know. She's not just going through some youthful hippie phase either. That girl's a real-life free spirit. She's a cool chick, but I get the impression that she's a little fragile too, right? Dragging the palm of my hand slowly down my face, I will myself to be strong enough to have this conversation. I blink my eyes open to find Dickie pouring a pile of salt onto the bar top. With the edge of his pinky, he's cutting out the shape of a circle and etching out a crude yin-yang, ready to tell me all the things I got wrong about his speech on the balance on the 12th hole earlier. What I was trying to say is there's a lot going on with that thing if you stop and think about it. He explains that it's drawn fluidly for a reason, and that it circles around to show that it's never ending. It's formless and able to adapt to anything. Able to bring entire cathedrals crumbling to the sea in order to get where it was always destined to go. Ricky, I sigh, taking advantage of a pause. Gripping the lion's skull ring so tightly that I can feel its fangs, I'm trying to put this in a way that doesn't come out slurred, incoherent gibberish. After sinking another drink, I tell him, it's just that Valerie, man, there are no edges with that girl. Everything is, well, like you said, fluid. I don't know. How do you describe an enigma? Valerie, I swear, man, she's as American as Eskimo pie, but she's also out of this world, man. I remind him, you know, she's not just St. Louis Eskimo like you're St. Louis Mexican either. She's like straight off the res. She doesn't like to talk about it all that much, but she'll mention if it comes up. Apparently, she was hard to handle, even back in her village. Her father was like a shaman or something, but they all died. After the big fire, when the Taggarts adopted her and moved her down here, she was a real wild child, full of grace. I don't think they could get her to wear shoes for like a year. All she'd wear was that damn scarf. Dickie had been nodding along as if in agreement, so I wasn't sure how sincere he was when he asked, what's that thing called where you think every tragedy is unique to yourself? Hey, Shivato, I shouted. I'm just saying, there's a lot going on there. I know you think she's one way. You think she's nice, but she's pretty far from nice. Scoffing, I dare him, try asking her to take that white ribbon from her neck. See what happens. That girl's wild, man. Crazy. She's crazy wild. She's like only what she wants us to believe she is. Slowly standing from his stool, Dickie tells me I still look like hell. He says people are supposed to be stopping by later, and I'd better get my shit together, and as he's walking away, I call him a fed under my breath, and he tells me, hey man, I heard that.